you been awakened by thundering booms from underground in recent nights? A lot of us have. Turns out they are called cryoseisms. I had to look that up.
Yeah.
Or frostquakes.
Or seskip. The big booms have rocked the landscape from Ontario to New York's North Country to Addison County, Vermont in recent weeks.
What you're hearing is similar to what thousands at least have reported hearing at night across Ontario over the last week or so. Experts call them cryoseisms, or frostquakes. The conditions created by the recent ice storm are perfect for them.
All of that water that seeped into the ground now is freezing. And as you know, water takes up a lot more space when it's a solid. And that expansion can create a lot of noise.
Now, the good news in all of this is that experts both here at the Science Centre and at Environment Canada say there's no real danger to frostquakes. They're about the equivalent of a small earthquake.
Thousands of residents woke with a bang this morning after a series of earthquakes rocked the state. Many have told of their fear and confusion as the shockwaves rumbled through the suburbs.
It felt like an explosion.
Sort of a loud bang and the house shook.
It sounded like
An update to the mysterious loud booms heard throughout Colonial Heights and Chesterfield over the past week. Since our story aired yesterday, we've received hundreds of calls, emails, and Facebook posts from our CBS 6 viewers.
What kind of surprised me the most is seeing how widespread this is. It's not really confined just to Colonial Heights and southern Chesterfield. It's far-reaching.
And while some believe it may be some sort of cold-related tremor, the average temperature last week was nearly 40 degrees.
People who live here say it sounded like a massive explosion, but experts say it was likely caused by the extreme temperatures over the last couple of days.
Reported feeling and hearing a loud boom twice this week, but authorities say they can't find the source. The mystery sounds and shakes around parts of East Baton Rouge, Livingston, St. Helena, and Tangipahoa parishes Monday and Tuesday. People who felt it say it was like two explosions back to back.
Sorry if it's really dark. I turn on like outdoor visibility on my phone. I don't think it's working.
Simply no let-up. Huge waves already battering the coast of Devon, with forecasters predicting yet more flooding and more misery. More than 100 flood warnings are now in place across the UK.
Elsewhere near the capital Lisbon, the swell was so bad, huge pools of foam like this started washing up along the shore.
Entire centres of some coastal towns have been inundated. Recent weeks in Western Europe have seen repeated bouts of stormy weather. Just before Christmas, high winds downed trees and knocked out power to hundreds of thousands of homes in France and Britain. It's raising concerns that the weather patterns this side of the Atlantic are getting worse.
39 pilot whales stranded on Farewell Spit at the top of the South Island could not be saved, say New Zealand authorities. The pod of long-finned pilot whales was spotted beached on the spit on Sunday afternoon. When staff returned on Monday morning, 12 of the animals were already dead, so the rest were shot to prevent further suffering.
Well, let's get a check of the weather right now from Mr. Roker once again, and you're going to debunk those people who don't believe there is such a thing as a polar vortex.
Well, a lot of folks have been saying there's no such thing as a polar vortex, and that it's some left-wing media conspiracy. Well, let me tell you something. First of all, we've never used the phrase global warming or climate change in conjunction with this. This is from my textbook from college, the Glossary of Meteorology from the American Meteorological Society, copyright 1959, okay? And here we go. Take a look right here, okay? Polar vortex. There it is. The large-scale cyclonic circulation in the middle and upper troposphere, specifically two centers, one near Baffin Island, another over northeastern Siberia. Okay? So for all the doubters out there, stuff it!
Here's a huge and bitter winter storm in America, which has sent temperatures to their lowest levels for decades. The so-called polar vortex occurs at the Earth's poles. It's an anti-clockwise rotating pool of frigid, dense air with a calm center, would you believe? The air, which is stuck in one place, gets colder and denser, and then when the winds encircling the air breaks down, they move away from the pole, or they can do, and unusually this Arctic air is heading south across Canada and into the United States.
Well, polar vortex is a sort of almost like a hurricane that forms over the poles, the Arctic in this case.
And this is the view from space. The NASA image shows the enormous scale of the vortex, covering most of the United States, with only some extreme southern places, such as parts of Florida, escaping the snowstorms.
In this time right now, we are getting it all the way into the United States. It does not happen all that often for that kink in the jet stream to allow it. That's why we're having the coldest air in decades. And perhaps you've heard this before, but this morning, Minneapolis, 22 below. The surface of Mars last week was 20 below, so it's actually colder.
A dangerous Arctic blast crippling the country, plunging temperatures to record-breaking lows.
Today, the death toll from the weather has now climbed to at least 21 people, 13 in Illinois and Indiana.
More than 11,000 flights have also been canceled nationwide in the past 4 days, and record lows have been set in at least 50 major cities, including a wide section of the South.
Much of the worst-hit areas are still reeling from heavy snowfall. Now frozen, it's made for extremely dangerous driving conditions. The polar plunge has struck unusually far south. In Oklahoma, the rotating pool of freezing air is producing rarely seen temperatures.
Americans have rarely experienced temperatures like this, and those temperatures are dropping. A deep freeze settling across a whole swathe of the U.S., an area already reeling from deadly snowstorms. While on the coast, not far away, seawater, which flooded some communities during the storms, has now frozen over, marooning people there too. And the big freeze has generated extraordinary images like this, the inside of the New York to Washington, D.C. train iced up.
Deadly weather, the flooding, 24 hours of non-stop rain, and the fierce winds coming with it. Just look at the view from above tonight, nearly 2 feet of rain falling in Florida. These images from Delray Beach. Further north, fierce winds and reported funnel clouds destroying these homes in Raleigh, North Carolina. Unreal. Just before families could even move into those homes, the devastating damage coming in. And look at these images. The frozen rivers beginning to melt across this country, now threatening to spill over, including New Jersey's Delaware River there, and in Pennsylvania, blocks of ice beginning to move on the Susquehanna River. While in the northwest tonight, a powerful storm hitting while we're on the air, tens of thousands already in the dark. Powerful winds hitting both coasts, a storm brewing in the west and in the east. Look at this tonight. In Raleigh, North Carolina, 86-mile-an-hour winds breaking a record.
Officials in Tonga have confirmed one person has been killed as a result of Tropical Cyclone Ian, but they're unable to say if the death toll is likely to rise.
The Category 5 cyclone caused widespread damage at the weekend. The Tongan Prime Minister says thousands of people have been left homeless.
Winds gusting up to 287 kilometres per hour left parts of Ha'apai Islands flattened.
The head of Tonga's disaster management team says it's a miracle that only one person was killed given the extent of the devastation. The most powerful storm to have hit the island in half a century.
Tonight, a strong earthquake rattled the island of Puerto Rico overnight. The earthquake had a magnitude of 6.5 and it struck just after midnight, about 34 miles north of Atillo. That's off the northern coast. Dozens of people reported fallen items in their homes and feeling the buildings sway in the capital of San Juan, around 59 miles from the quake's epicenter.
Let's head over to the Philippines. At least 20 people have been killed and thousands displaced as 2 days of heavy rains set off floods and landslides in the southern Philippines. 13 people are reportedly missing. Officials said the flooding has affected over 100,000 people from 10 provinces and prompted about 10,000 to flee to safer ground. Many homes were submerged and bridges damaged.
At least 13 people are dead and 2 more are missing after torrential rain hit the Indonesian island of Sulawesi.
About 40,000 people were forced to flee their homes. Flooding in the north of Sulawesi province was caused by torrential rains. In the province capital of Manado, banks of 4 rivers flooded part of the city. The rains caused landslides which crushed several houses in the province. 4 bridges were destroyed.
Heavy rains have also flooded roads in Jakarta, the country's capital.
It's the middle of summer in Australia, and they're struggling with temperatures in some places reaching 115. The heat sparked wildfires. It's put a strain on power grids, forced a delay of almost 4 hours at the Australian Open in Melbourne, a move welcomed by the players who had complained about what one of them called inhumane playing conditions in the heat.
Temperatures have been incredibly high, close to hitting record levels. Add to that low levels of rain recently, and forests are bone dry.
Heat wave.
The only thing falling from the skies may be bats.
This is a small section.
The country's Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals confirmed last week 100,000 bats were killed in the heat wave, a number that's continued to grow.
In California, a state of emergency is now in effect because of the extreme drought there, and those drought conditions are fueling a destructive wildfire that's been burning for days northeast of Los Angeles.
The fiery images coming out of California this week seem to defy the calendar. This winter wildfire east of Los Angeles is a symptom of the drought that now covers parts of 11 states, including the majority of California, seeing the least amount of rainfall in more than a century.
Some spots in Northern California are 10% of where they should be. Folsom Reservoir supplies Sacramento its water, at least a lot of it. It's at 18% full.
The wonder of the Northern Lights reminds us of the intimate connection we have with our star. The aurora borealis happens when solar winds hit the Earth's upper atmosphere. But many of these displays may soon vanish. Something is happening to the solar activity on the surface of the sun. It's declining, fast.
Whatever measure you use, it's coming down. The solar peaks are coming down. And for example, with the flares, it looks very, very significant.
The solar cycles now are getting smaller and smaller. The activity is getting less and less.
Solar activity rises and falls in 11-year cycles, and right now we're at the peak, the solar maximum. But this cycle's maximum is eerily quiet.
I've been a solar physicist for 30 years. I've never seen anything quite like this. If you want to go back to see when the sun was this inactive in terms of the minimum we've just had and the peak that we have now, you've got to go back about 100 years. So this is not something that I've seen in my lifetime. It's not something that a couple of generations before me have seen.
The number of sunspots is a fraction of what scientists expected. Solar flares are half. Richard Harrison is the head of space physics at the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory in Oxfordshire. He says the rate that solar activity is falling mirrors a period in the 17th century where sunspots virtually disappeared.
The Maunder minimum, of course, was a period of almost no sunspots at all for decades, and we saw a really dramatic period where there were very cold winters in the Northern Hemisphere. It was a period where you had a kind of a mini ice age.
Well, we don't know what this means, but we can show you an extraordinary photograph of an extraordinary lightning strike at the Christ the Redeemer statue that towers over the city of Rio. More than just an outburst of nature, it apparently caused damage. The local newspaper is reporting it cracked part of a thumb on one of the arms of the famed statue.